Good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome to UN House. Today is the 7th session of Bhutan Dialogues. Bhutan Dialogues is an open platform for dynamic conversations on issues of national interest with the objective to listen, share, and sharpen so as to achieve greater results in development. We hope these results are achieved at least 2 levels. At a personal level, where we strengthen our personal capacity, and within the development work we do to assist this great country. Today we intend to bridge the gap between education and the different traditions that are deeply rooted in Bhutanese culture. Our theme is education responsible for imparting culture? I would like to start off with 2 points on the topic. The first one is a quote from His Majesty Jigme Khesar Nyamgil Wangchuk. And I quote, "While young people leaving university must be armed with degrees, it is more important that they be endowed with a strong sense of values that brings meaning and purpose in their lives, as well as stable, bright future ahead for society and the world." How can we deny the importance of values? But with the recent challenges we have seen in Phuntsho, and even here in Thimphu involving teachers, we are invited to ask the question, how can we do differently, and what can we do differently in ensuring the traditions of Bhutan are dynamically used to assist Bhutanese living and working in the 21st century? Secondly, in Bhutan, there is significant internet and social media penetration. A recent study indicates that as many as 33% of university students could be considered addicted to social media and the internet. When we say addicted, I think that means we're dealing with issues of cyberbullying, fraud, relationship cheating, health issues, hacking accounts. And these can be large challenges of those that are addicted. And of course the question then becomes, how can we dynamically apply our Bhutanese traditions to help with those that are addicted? During the course of today's conversation, we will discuss these issues at greater depth. My first opportunity today here is to introduce our guest speaker, Dr Francoise Pommaret, also known as Om Tashi Wangmo. She is the recipient of the National Order of Merit, Gold, from His Majesty. She is a cultural anthropologist, Director of Research at the National Centre for Scientific Research, France, and the Associate Professor of the College of Language and Culture here at the Royal University of Bhutan. While it may have happened in the distant past, she had a previous incarnation as a UNV volunteer here in Bhutan. Our host, Dr Karma Phuntsho, it's very difficult to find new information on Dr Karma, but recently I was travelling in the southwest, and I ended up having a conversation with a colleague from Trungsa, and this friend, he says, "Oh yes, Dr Karma did Mifan's dialectics." And we stayed silent for a few minutes, because I think what we were trying to say was, had actually either of us read the book? And then both of us agreed, almost at the same time, anybody who has a mind that can go into Mifam's dialectics and come out intact is a very good host for Bhutan Dialogues. Let me take the opportunity to tell you about the forthcoming Bhutan Dialogues and who our speakers will be. In June, we will have Dorji, the Executive Director of YDF, and she'll be talking about issues around youth and development here in Bhutan. And in July, we will have Dr Phuntsho, leading psychiatrist here in Bhutan, who's very forthright in the way he expresses himself, and no doubt he will be equally forthright when he meets Dr Phuntsho here with Bhutan Dialogues. With that, I want to again thank you all for joining us here today, and I wish to hand over to Karma and Dr Karma and Francoise.
So, Professor Pommaret, welcome to Bhutan Dialogues. This is our 7th session. As an academic, you'll be fully aware of, very familiar with the idea of critical thinking, of open and free discourse and discussions. This is a forum where we aim to promote critical thinking, open discussions on issues related to development, and carry out a civil conversation on issues relevant to us. So I often say, putting it in a Buddhist idiom, this is a forum to practice mindful listening and right speech. It's a great honor for us to have you as a speaker today, particularly because you were born as a French and have lived in Bhutan and are now a Bhutanese citizen. You have seen the country both from inside and outside. And as I always ask our guest speakers, I would like to ask you how you began on this journey. What made you who you are right now? What brought you here?
Thank you, Dr. Karma, and thank you to the UN and Loden Foundation for inviting me for Bhutan Dialogue. Well, it can be quite a long journey, as you can imagine, but I will make it very, very short. I was born and brought up in Africa till I was 17 in the Congo, so very far from Asia. But I always, since I was quite a small child, interested in Asia. I was very good in geography and history, and automatically I was attracted to Asia. So then I came back to France, did study, and then had the opportunity to go in the Himalayas when I was quite young, and decided this is a culture which really interests me, and I would start learning classical Tibetan in Paris, as well as first history and then anthropology. And that's how I began, and then I was traveling I did my MA in Ladakh, and then I happened to come here by karma or by chance, whatever you can call it. And I came for 3 months initially, and well, I'm here still.
Yeah. Well, an excellent karma.
Excellent karma.
But when was that? When did you first arrive in Bhutan?
Okay, the first time I came to Bhutan was in 1979. I was as a guide, one of the first tourist guides in Bhutan. Then I liked it, but that was all. And then I came in in February 1981.
So you're a cultural anthropologist and a historian who very closely, very attentively studies cultures and cultural changes. You have come to Bhutan in 1979 and has been frequently visiting and in the past few decades living here. What are the big cultural changes that you have seen? If I ask you in 2 ways, do you have some examples of really positive changes that has taken place? Are there also negative changes that alarms you? Can you share a few examples?
Yes, of course, but first of all I would like to say that it is my view, and it in no way my organization. It's just a frank view, assessment of the situation as I see it. For me, the positive changes have been tremendous. So I would like to start with that first. in terms, especially for the Bhutanese. I'm not speaking for myself, of course. I'm speaking for the general Bhutanese population. Better health, although we have the non-communicable disease now, but better health in all, better hygiene, better food, better communication, better everything. There were dangers at my time when I came as a young little woman, which were really present all the time. We had no way to get out. For example, if we were very sick, the hospital was there, but very basic. And then now, many, many women were still dying in childbirth, you know. So I would say in terms of health and hygiene, this country has done fantastically. Also in terms of communication, the roads, telephone, now I don't have to walk up 5 hours up and reach a temple which is closed because the Khmer is gone for shopping. Now I call the Khmer and say, are you going to be there? And he say yes, so it saves a lot of time. It's great. Education, but education have a slight...
Yeah. So before we move on to education, obviously you made it clear that there are major improvements in socio-economic conditions of people. But are there cultural changes that has also alarmed you, that you see are negative? Do you have any examples that particularly sticks to your mind?
Well, I guess I should say, I have so many bad examples and everybody would be so happy. But in fact, reflecting about the past years, I think I don't have that many bad examples, even in the cultural field. For example, now I'm going to give you some example. When I came to Bhutan, everybody was singing Hindi songs, watching Hindi movies. Everybody was wearing trousers, except few people. Of course, the peasants were still wearing go, but in town, it had gone off almost. I mean, in town, Thimphu was 15,000 people. So there was all this very, very worrying influence of Indian culture on Bhutan. And when I started doing anthropology and field work, people were not at all interested in the culture, in their culture. They were saying, why are you interested in that? It's old. Now we are moving off to development. In 35 years, I have seen a sort of Bhutanese cultural identity being built, either through media, through radio, television, Dzongkha language. I think we'll talk about it also. And not only, and the dress, of course, but that's not. But what I found the most important, in my view, is that the Bhutanese in general, including in the villages, have become very proud of their tradition. And they don't tell me anymore when I go to a village, oh, this is old, don't look at it, it's only our grandfather. Now they tell me, oh, you didn't come to record this in our village. How come? You know, they are jealous of each other. And I found there is a much more greater awareness about culture of Bhutan, about the culture. So I'm not that negative, although you would, maybe some people...
So what would you say is the reason behind this revival of cultural consciousness? What made people realize that their own cultural heritage is special and good for them? As an anthropologist, how would you analyze this situation?
First of all, I think a lot of people, it might seem paradoxal, but the fact that the Bhutanese were going abroad and realizing how Bhutan was precious and unique in their tradition, in their way of living, and then meeting people also abroad sometimes who tell them, oh, you have a fantastic country, fantastic culture. That created awareness, and because it is a small society, this had a ripple effect through the society, even through the villages. Also, because of more people came to Bhutan, Westerners who were interested, like me, who were interested, and people were wondering why this mad woman is interested in that, you know. So that made them more aware. And then I would say the television, BBS, the documentary on BBS. Of course, we have also all the, the home ministry, home and cultural affairs ministries policies. Then we have in the village, in the district, we have the cultural officers. There has been a lot of UNESCO, a lot of workshop, a lot of awareness, and also, I would say, NGO like Sheju, for example, or the National Library, or College of Language and Culture. We have done a lot also. So by going to the village and showing people that their culture is interesting, they start wondering why, after all, why it's not, it might be interesting, yes. So I think that is one of the reasons.
But then we do come across lots of people telling us that, particularly the youth, losing interest in culture, in the youth becoming victims of globalization and the homogenization that modernization has brought about. So the cultural consciousness that you are talking about that has started to grow, does that apply also to the young people? Say people who are going to colleges, schools, like the students of ILCS, but students, say, of other colleges, because ILCS, of course, specializes in culture.
Yes, so I'm really blessed by to be in a college where the students are interested in culture, right? But I tend to be a little bit positive and negative, so I will start with the positive. When I came to Bhutan, I thought really, with the speed of development in the 80s, Bhutan will be, as a culture, will be wiped out. And 35 years later, Bhutan is not wiped out. So I am still, and I see people who were young when I was young, and now who are much older, who start doing again the ritual, going to lamas for teaching, and all these cultural functions that we have in Bhutan are very important. So maybe it is something particular to the youth that they want to say, oh, this is old-fashioned. And so regarding globalization, of course, now the onslaught of globalization, especially through the media and internet, might be worrying. Yes, it is worrying. But one point I would say that there is nobody, I cannot believe, I'm maybe too enthusiastic, I cannot believe that people are not interested in their own culture if it is presented in an interesting, lively way. And I think it may, now I don't want to put the blame on anybody, but it might be some structural problems which are inherent now to the Bhutanese society, who make the young people less interested in their culture.
Yeah. So let me come to that. You mentioned international exposure, you mentioned promotion and advocacy on part of NGOs or institutions, research agencies that helped bring back the cultural consciousness. But that can only have a limited audience. If you had to really reach the vast majority of the population, particularly the youth, then we have to go through the state mainstream education system. And earlier you were expressing a little bit of reservation about education system really becoming as positive a development as other areas. So in terms of cultural promotion, has our education system, the school education system, been effective? Has it been, in fact, even contributing adequately?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And that's where I have reservation on education. In France, we call education system the mammoth, because it's so huge and impossible to move. So I guess in Bhutan, as I've seen it along the years, education system has become, although they are trying, it has been a lot of improvement, trying their best, it's still a mammoth. And it's still very much influenced by the Western standards. And when I see the children taking the PISA I don't know if you say PISA or PISA test.
PISA.
Well, I'm not jumping with joy about it, because that's making children think completely global and completely Western style, or Singaporean style, whatever you can call it. I think here we have a big problem, and the big problem is with the youth who are not aware of their culture, because the education system as a whole, again, I'm not blaming anybody, has not been able to deliver efficiently on that account. And I will give you one example. Recently, I heard a friend, she has been out, she's Bhutanese, but she has been out of Bhutan for many, many years and traveling all over the world. And she's about my age. And she told me, oh, when I was in school, we were saying the prayer to Jampeya, Manjusri, every morning, but I never knew what it meant. So there I realized there is a big problem. The explanation, the interest. You make people recite a prayer, which is very good. I'm not against prayers. But why don't you explain what it means exactly to the children? Make them interested in what they are saying. So that's one. This is the explanation part, which seems to be missing.
So some very basic practical advice you have is the prayers students chant in the schools should come with explanations. They should understand the prayers.
They should understand. If they don't understand every word, doesn't matter. But they should understand why they are saying it, who is Manjusri or Jampeya, why they are saying it, and what benefit it can bring. Yes, yes, absolutely. And this is one small example. I think some years ago I gave a lecture in a college in Bhutan. I will not name the college. And I just asked, these were college students, I just asked the college student, which is the most important pilgrimage site? Maybe my question was not good. I take the blame. Which is the most important pilgrimage site in Western Bhutan? Okay. You know what they told me? Singyedzong. So that means they have a problem first with the geography.
Yes.
Second, and something as basic as that. And second, they don't know, they cannot name taxon immediately. So I thought, these are college students. So this is a problem. This is basically the communication of the data to the children or to the student, how it's done.
So if we take this issue a bit deeper, obviously the cultural upbringing of a person affects the personal identity, the inner psychological well-being of the person. Now when you have the Bhutanese children being brought up and educated in a system that is not aligned to the cultural world they live in, do you see the negative impact? What are the consequences of such an education system on the inner psychological state of the children?
Well, I don't want to sound alarmist, but we all know, for example, that when you cut a people from their roots, there is abundance of suicide, alcoholism, and many, many problems. And we have one of the most global case is the case of the Inuit in northern Canada, who were totally deculturalized and have now, or Native American Indians. So I think it is very, very dangerous to cut a child from his roots. Now, many people say, oh, education doesn't have to impart that, and it's up to the parents. Yes, the parents should do it. But the parents nowadays in Thimphu or in the big cities, they are both working. They may not have all the time to give to the children. So education should really, really play a very important factor, not to cut the root, because that's where I put the blame. I mean, not the blame, but where one of the cause of the deep uneasiness of the youth in Bhutan is that some are completely cut from their root.
But are there any country or communities in the world where in our times they managed to have an education system that is very neatly aligned to their own cultural rootings, because we live in a very globalized world where through technology you're exposed to all kinds of things, and so transculturalism is inevitable in things.
I'm not against transculturalism, of course, but there should be a part of the curriculum which is dedicated to Bhutanese. I don't say history, I don't say religion, I just say to Bhutanese culture as a whole, and we could include religion and different religion of Bhutan, different side of Bhutan, different cultural aspects of Bhutan. In France, I come from France, and we have also a very strong sense of identity. That's why I like Bhutan also, because of the strong strength of identity. But the curriculum in France was not as globalized as the Bhutanese curriculum. We have still a very, very French-specific French literature, French government organization, civic teachings in the school that makes you feel you are part of a nation. I feel this is very important.
So when we talk about cultural education and culture in general, language always comes into the picture. And in the case of France, I think you are again quite nationalistic in terms of keeping the French language, especially because you are right next door to the Anglo-Saxon world. So here in Bhutan, do you think we need to be a little more particular about the language used in the mainstream education system? Earlier you expressed that you said you'll be sharing a bit about Dzongkha. What is the status of the local languages here from your perspective?
Okay, this can be a very tricky question, but I'm trying to answer it frankly. When do you say local language? What do you mean?
Well, I don't want to just single out Dzongkha, the national language, but I'm also talking about all the other languages that are endemic.
Yes, but you include Dzongkha?
Yes.
Okay. For me, I would not even say local language. I think it's little demeaning. I would say the language, the Bhutanese language, languages. And we know we have, according to the linguist, 19 languages in this country, which is amazing. I think the language which are not written, but which are spoken in the family, are very, very much alive. Very much alive. And the children, because most of my colleagues are from non-Dzongkha speakers region, so at home they speak maybe 2 different languages. And I think it's wonderful. And the language are not dying at all. It's very interesting to see that when we go for a meeting, the meetings are in Dzongkha, and everybody speaks Dzongkha at the meeting. But as soon as we come out of the meeting, everybody will speak in its own language, and everybody will be able to communicate. That's one of the beauty of Bhutan, the wealth and the richness of the linguistic. But Dzongkha, I know you are for an extension more pushing Dzongkha. Before pushing Dzongkha, I think we should really, I know it started at last, we should really have it framed into a way which is easy to learn. That is to move from the old grammar books, which were modeled after the classical Tibetan grammar books, move into maybe a little bit more, I won't say Western, I don't know how to express, but more easy to understand grammar, standardize more efficiently the spelling, make it more easy maybe to teach, make it more agreeable, make it more simple to understand and to teach. One thing which strikes me, Of course, I'm not good at language, so that it's okay, but everybody knows. And my Dzongkha is absolutely abysmal. But still, I'm quite surprised when I go to the village and when I talk with some of my foreign colleagues over the course of 35 years, that many of them have picked up Sachopka, Sangla, and are unable to pick up Dzongkha. So there is a problem here. Of course, Sachopka is much easier from what I see, but still, why can't you teach Dzongkha? If you can teach French, why can't you teach Dzongkha? So there is a problem of teaching, and Dzongkha should be made more easy for the people. Because when I go to the village, people say, you speak Dzongkha as a villager. I say, no, my Dzongkha is horrible. And then they laugh, they say, yes, but you can communicate, you know? But I'm one of the very few foreigners who can at least communicate. I'm not saying speaking. Yeah.
Well, you speak Dzongkha quite well. I
No,
know that.
don't exaggerate.
Now,
please.
coming back to the issue of languages.
Yes.
Now, it's true that Dzongkha as a new written language is facing enormous challenges in terms of having a proper grammar, standardized orthography. But do you think there is enough political will to make these things happen?
Exactly. There is a kind of political will in all the committees they have and the meetings they have to standardize Dzongkha. There is political will. But that's not how you are going to touch the youth and make them. I feel one thing which has, in my time, during my time in Bhutan, improved Dzongkha level tremendously is the TV, the movie, and the songs. So that has really, really made Dzongkha much more popular. But I would say that there should be, sorry, it's a difficult subject, a budget dedicated to Dzongkha tools, media Dzongkha tools. For example, have kits in Dzongkha, like some of the education, health advertisement on PBS about breastfeeding, feeding. You have Dzongkha, you have English. It's perfect. You know, you can learn Dzongkha in a nice way. So why not have, for example, a 3 minutes kit about the story, one story about a village or about a cultural story in Dzongkha, written subtitle in Dzongkha, and even, if possible, subtitle in English. And put it on internet, put it on WeChat. Look at Abbokto. Abbokto was such a success with the kid. It's easy. So I think what could be done, is just my view, what could be done is that there is a more emphasis on Dzongkha through the media that the youth are really watching.
But apart from these extracurricular ways of promoting Dzongkha, should there be more time and resources allocated in the education system itself for Dzongkha?
I think there should be more entertaining books, yes, definitely.
What about sessions in a day for instruction?
Okay, now, it's not going to please many people, but you are pushing me to that. I think there should be more session in Dzongkha at the condition that the person who teaches the subject in Dzongkha is not a Dzongkha teacher, but a real subject teacher. For example, I know you are pushing for history in Dzongkha, which I'm totally against.
Bhutan history, not
Bhutan
just
history, which I'm against so far, because I don't think we have, at the primary and secondary level, teachers who can speak very good Dzongkha, but who are also historian and can deliver as a history and not as a Dzongkha class. So that's, at this condition, yes, Bhutanese history in Dzongkha, yes. But right now, I don't think it's possible at the primary and secondary level.
So exactly for that reason, shouldn't the education ministry and other state institutions invest resources to build the faculty, build the curriculum required to teach Bhutanese history in Dzongkha?
Oh, yes, but you say it, not me.
But coming back to the issue of culture, and particularly relating that to personal well-being and development, as Bhutan starts to undertake the process of modernization and development, our cultural habits have also changed enormously, right? Like our consumption habits, for instance. We are no longer the subsistence farmers we used to be. We are no longer the very spiritual people we used to be. We're now fully into the globalized consumerist culture. What aspects of Bhutanese cultural heritage can you bring from the past to help us solve some of these contemporary challenges we face? Do you have any examples of specific Bhutanese cultural practice that you really admired and that would contribute towards sustainable development?
Yes. I would like to speak about what happened in the past and which is still practiced in the village on some occasions, which is a community spirit. This community spirit, which existed in many, many villages in Bhutan, where all the community even when I came, it was still like that. People will help you in case of death, in case of problem, in case of building houses. All this personal interaction, relationship in the village were very, very important. And we even had sokpa. And we have tsokpa now at a more informal level. But I think, again, for example, if it could be possible that a community, now we have tsokpa through WeChat. Tsokpa, for those who don't know, the foreigner who are here, as a, what you call it?
A community group.
Community group. We have that through WeChat, and it's amazing how it's working and how it's reviving the community spirit. But also, for example, I would suggest people from one village, I would take, let's call it Gakiling. Let's call it Gakiling. It's an imaginary village. Why don't they come together, even if they are in Thimphu or anywhere in an urban center? Because I really feel that's urban center which are the problem. And look after their own youth. That is, teach them the culture of the village. I know it exists in some pockets of Bhutan where some villagers are taking a lot of care of their youth and engaging them in the cultural practice and everything. But there are some villages or some community which do not do it, and then the kids are left all alone. For example, instead of going out at night, they could have a session with elderly people of the community who teach them about nicely, not long, half an hour, 45 minutes. Okay, we used to do that, and we used to have migration, we used to do this and that. So I feel that would really help also support the youth. They don't feel alone, they feel rooted somewhere. The problem is derooting or unrooting. Yes?
No, wonderful advice that we should bring back the community solidarity that we had in the rural past to our urban environment now, and especially to help the youth. I think there are quite a lot of tsokpas or community groups that do work mainly to renovate the temple or build a stupa or do some material work or work involving material outputs, but not so much for intangible cultural
preservation. But also, it's not only cultural preservation, it's really binding the youth to their root and to their own village. Yes.
So, going on with helping the youth, you really brought up this topic on which I wanted to ask you the last question. As a lot of our audience are youth, we often try to end the session with few tips for them, practical things that they can adopt in their own lives from you as an example. So what are the few things that you always practice almost as a habit to improve your professionalism, to sharpen yourself? What helps you keep afloat amid all the problems you may face sometimes? So if you can share a few such tips for the audience.
I don't like to speak about myself, and in fact, I would like to add one thing, if I'm allowed.
Yes, please.
About why so many people are stressed in Bhutan, why so many youth. I really thought about it, and I realized that I was one of the cause of the stress on my colleagues. Why? And this is a notion of time. Bhutanese, are always said to be very bad, not very good at planning or implementing in time. It's better. But I think it comes from the notion of time in the Himalaya and in the vocabulary. In Bhutan you say tempo, or you say tomorrow, after tomorrow, after tomorrow, and that's it. Or yesterday, day before yesterday, or day before yesterday, and that's it. And then it's maompa in the future, or tempo. And we, as Westerner, we come with the globalization, come with the idea of you have to give me this in 1 week, and this day, and this meeting, and this. And people are getting in their psyche totally stressed. And now I'm getting totally stressed also by that. Also. So that's what I wanted to say. I think this is one very important and not known source of stress in the Bhutanese society. Now, what you wanted to tell me to tell you about myself, how I do. Well, I guess I'm very boring. I work.
In what sense?
I work.
You work.
I work.
So hard work.
Hard
Is that
work.
advice?
Hard work. A goal, and always wanting to learn more. Always never feel satisfied with what you have. Always wanting to learn more and explore more. But I guess it's very strong discipline, work discipline, very strong also lifestyle discipline. No late evening, no drink, you know me. So this is also one, but a goal and a hope and always wanting to do more and better. That's really what keeps me.
But that would come with the sense of time management, wouldn't it? So
yes, but that's why I'm saying I wish I was more like a Bhutanese now, because sometimes I get so stressed by my goals. The goal I'm self-inflicting on myself, So yes, so.
Well, thank you very much. We'll open to the floor for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Pommaret. It's very informative information. Thank you. I have a question in terms of...
Would you introduce yourself quickly? Just tell your name and...
I'm from RTC, exchange student from London, actually. I met you several years ago in Koto institution.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, my question is in terms of the Sangha and the monks in here. Because I found in Thimphu, there's a lot of people that once was monk and then converted to the lay people, which I found is a very uncommon phenomenon in the other Himalaya country. So I want to ask, what's the reason for that? And I heard, the Sangha, the number of the monks decreasing recently, probably because of the globalization. So, do you think the government needs to encourage more people to be monk, or what's the cultural influence of that? And when I was in Punakha, in the Dalugomba, the village, I found there's some very cute little monks having class in the village. So I want to know more about the education for the young monks and how they adapt themselves to the society, the modern society.
I think it could be a full subject of 1 hour. Your question is so huge, and it will be very difficult for me to summarize it, because it might lead to some misunderstanding. But I'm going. How many minutes do I have? 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. So really, your question is very interesting. First of all, in the Himalayas in general, it is normal, and maybe because of impermanence, that the children who are put in the monastery young, they come out of the monastery when they are elderly, more older, let's say, adult, and they want to have a lay, what we call a lay life. So it's not something unusual, it's something quite the norm Tibet, Mongolia, Bhutan, Ladakh, Sikkim, all this Himalayan Tibetan culture area. Like you have, for example, in Burma, especially, or in Thailand, you have the kids who go to the monastery for 1 week or 2 weeks or 2 months, that's it. So here they can go, and then if they decide to go out of the monastery, they can do it. There is no bad feeling addressed to him. You are not monk, you can, if you want to give back your vow, and then you become what we call gete, that is retired monk, old monk. And this you can get. Most of my colleagues, and I know several people in this room who are all monks, they are retired monks, okay? So it doesn't pose a philosophical or a theological problem here, number one. Number two, what was your question about the number of monks?
Yeah.
What? I didn't get it. You said that there were less monks?
Yeah.
Yes, of course there are less monks. But you should remember also that until recently, the number of monks was imposed by the government. And there was what we call, in Dzongkha, the monk tax. So each family had to give a monk. It was compulsory, a child to the monastery. So of course, when you do like that, you can have a lot of monks. Now, would you like to have less monks, better educated, or a lot of monks which are really good for nothing? So that's one of the questions. And I would say it is better to have less monks, which have a higher degree of education, are really into what they are doing. And I will certainly not encourage, as it's my personal opinion, any government approach to that. No. But regarding the education, I think Dr. Karma can speak better than me, but I know that many monasteries and nunneries, because the nuns are at the forefront of change here, are also having English, mathematics, and it was also under the impulsion of His Majesty the Fifth King, who wanted the monks to be more educated. But maybe you can add something.
Yeah, I can add later on, but maybe in the interest of time, we'll go for the next question. Please.
Good evening. I'm Tanin Wonget from Ethnic Truth and Track. My question is, firstly, thank you, Antashil. I think most of our discussion was centered on the Dzongkha language. So I'm a little concerned as a parent. My 3 boys goes to a private school in Tokyo, the Tokyo school. So in the evening time, I always try to look back to their notebook and textbook. And what I've realized as a concerned parent is, the Dzongkha textbook, like if I reflect back to our times, in our school times, back in 90s, and early 2000, of course, maybe, the Dzongkha textbook was very readable, very nice. But I think in the pretext of simplifying the Dzongkha textbook, I find even myself hard to read the Dzongkha textbook. I find even Queensland much better to read than Dzongkha textbook. So in the context of maybe simplifying, or maybe syntax or grammar, I really do not know. But I sense that Dzongkha textbook, even as when you read Dzongkha, there's a fluency in reading Dzongkha. It's very interesting. But Dzongkha textbook I see is even for children, they have a hard time to read Dzongkha textbook. So in the context of simplifying the textbook, has it become more harder in fact? And even the content of the textbook, like stories, some fictions, you hardly find sometimes a story that can encourage against optimism or against positivity. So I think these are the areas I think need to be addressed. So what is your thoughts on this? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think you put up a very, very interesting and core question. I don't have children, but I have a godson who is going to Dr. Tomge school, and I'm going to look at his Dzongkha textbook, because I remember the Dzongkha textbook were a short story and even quite easy to read in the old time. Now I have no idea, so I have really to look at but I don't mean, when I speak about propagating Dzongkha, I'm not automatically saying simplifying it. It doesn't mean that to me. It means making it readable, enjoyable, making good stories. But the spelling, if that's what you are talking about, I cannot understand why there is this emphasis on simplifying Dzongkha spelling. French has a horrendous spelling. Okay, everybody knows that. We spend years of our life learning the spelling. Well, we are still alive. And there is no problem. And at least we know from where the words come from. I don't see why we have to simplify. And what worries me, if it's oversimplification of Dzongkha, that there will be a big gap, now maybe, between people who can read historical text and people who read Dzongkha. Who is going to read the historical text if we oversimplify Dzongkha? Yeah, that's another, but that's a historian I'm worried about. But I don't think simplifying the language is a key of everything. And it would be more interesting stories, well written, fluent, with a lot of pictures or something like that, with a real theme, like a small novel or short story. But I don't know what Dr. Karma says. That's my view. So I think the book should be really reconsidered.
I actually don't have any knowledge about the textbooks, so
Yeah, you
I
too.
will pass my comments.
Yes, Ritu.
So I think, was it in 2004 that you wrote that article about the state of this anthropology in Bhutan? Was that 2004?
Oh yes, that was a long time ago. Yes, yes.
So just given the time gap since you wrote that article, I was wondering, where do you think are the critical gaps in the study of culture in Bhutan, in those 14 years? What role can anthropology, the discipline that is usually, engaged in the study of culture, what role can anthropology play in filling those gaps? And and thirdly, what do you think it's important to start thinking about ethics in the study of research, for instance, with human subjects?
Okay.
So it's a three-part question, but interrelated.
Yes, but again, it's a long, I could reply by one. So it's a very interesting and specialized question you are asking, Ritu. Thank you very much. I think anthropology has moved a long way in, the proper study of anthropology. And where I would see gaps still now, and a lot of gaps, is that in Bhutan, quantitative research is the alpha and omega of everything, and I don't agree. I think quantitative research should be the base, should be a good baseline, but we cannot draw conclusion on correct conclusions. So on quantitative research. So a lot of qualitative research. First of all, that's where it should be improved. Second, look at not only documenting and ethnographic, which is very important because that's the base, but also try to analyze the data in a more anthropological way, which would benefit the society in general. But so maybe this analysis has to come. I hope it will come. Right now we are very much, including me, in a descriptive time, and that might move fast, but definitely qualitative research has to be done. Otherwise we are going to produce beautiful UN charts, and UNICEF table, and no content. Yes, I'm interested to know that the mortality in childbirth has decreased. But why? Why there is still mortality in childbirth? That's why. So that's thing that the data do not access. So qualitative. Number two, you are saying.
Ethics.
No, that was number three, ethics. Okay, number three, ethics. Yes. we should also give a very strong ethical base to any people who are doing research and in the field or otherwise. I have been aghast at some anthropologists, famous names, who went to village, carry information, and when they went back, gave a big speech in an international conference, giving the name of the village, the name of the people, the name of the family, and intimate detail of the family, and it happened that I knew the family. So I felt extremely uncomfortable and very upset about it. So there should be some guidelines given to everybody. And I feel also sometimes in Bhutan, people who have, say, MA in sociology or MA in anthropology or MA in social science, whatever, they start doing field work without any ethical basis and ethical consent form, explaining the people why they are doing this. In my young age, when I went to the village and I asked, how many cows do you have, or something like that, people say, you are from the income tax. You know, they were very scared, in the East especially. And when they were trying to hide, they were brewing RR, you know, because I think I was going to denounce them to the tax, but it's not that. So you have to go and you have to explain to people. Do you want me to tell that? Do you want people? I just did a recent field work with shaman, Pau Pamo Nyenjom and all. And each time I ask them, do you want your name? Yes. Do you want your name? No. So we have to respect that. We have to respect.
But it's not just in case of text ban. Even among anthropologists, just a few decades ago, they were adopting more extractive methods with informants, say, whereas now we have moved on from that chapter of Western anthropologists coming on a sample sort of Asian or African community. We have now better collaborative projects with better ethics.
Yes,
so
with better
the whole
ethics.
discipline has moved.
But you will, and we are talking about social science here. I'm still very surprised. Recently, I had to fight for my colleague to be included in the article I published in a book, because the Western anthropologists were telling me, but he is your informant. I say, yes, he's my informant, but without him I can't write the article. So his name has to be included at the same level as mine. And this, I was surprised. And now I'm starting again with another one. And I can see this is not really practiced among Western anthropologists. I'm quite shocked, in fact. Yes.
I want to also second your opinion on how we need to get into more analysis now. I think especially today, as we are in a forum for development practice, there is a great deal of academic work done for the advancement of knowledge, to create new knowledge. That's wonderful, but then when you really want to apply that knowledge into real development practice, you need very good analysis, as you pointed out earlier. So we need to make our knowledge relevant to the issues in the world. Jerry.
So let me trigger on that last sentence. Make our knowledge relevant for our world. So, Francoise, one of the areas that probably concerns you as much as it concerns me is gender-based violence here in Bhutan. Violence against women has recently been termed an epidemic. I think the statistics run something like 72% of women believe that the violence that's done against them is okay. When I think about education and culture, I'm imagining that some of these big challenges we see happening in the area of violence against women are part of this transforming society, what you seem to be terming what could be becoming a rootless society, especially among the youth. So my question to you is, when it comes to traditions, are there any parts of the tradition which we can, as development practitioners, build upon in bringing about a change within this challenge to the society, which may not get less as we continue to globalize, as we continue to urbanize, as we continue to modernize. I know that this is a tough question late in the afternoon, but I thought, being a woman, I think you may have, and having this depth of understanding of the culture, you may be able to bring something new to the discussion.
Well. First of all, I'm just a simple anthropologist and not a development anthropologist. It is true that the gender violence is really bothering me, and the children, and the violence against children also. Please, this is very. But it's not going to please many people here, but I have to say that I don't think it's a new phenomenon. It has always existed in the Bhutanese society, like it exists in all the societies in the world. Violence against women, violence against men, because I have seen also men getting beaten up by their wife when they are drunk. And I would attribute a lot of it to the alcohol consumption, which is senseless and which causes so many problems here. So that is one, but as in France, like in France, alcohol consumption is a cultural taboo here, in a way. In France also. So it is a cultural practice. So it's very difficult, and you will notice that very often the violence takes place after festival. Man will think that his wife in a festival is flirting with another man, and both will be drunk and then start fighting. So this is really happen all the time. It's just because of the modern tools that we have now and the awareness that this issue is coming up in the forefront of the society. For me, it has nothing to do with the rootlessness or whatever. It has always been there, and we can maybe build on the idea of human being, compassion. But when you have alcohol, how can you make people listen and say, you have to have compassion for your wife or for your children or for your husband, by the way, when you are totally drunk? And there is a very nice story in Buddhism showing this, how alcohol is the root of all evils. So I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not sure. I deplore it, and what I deplore most is that I know personally some women who are very well educated, who have a high position, who are beaten up by their husband, but will not denounce it, or will not go against the husband. And that is another further. So it is a huge problem. I don't know. I cannot tell you. I'm sorry to disappoint you. Maybe Karma, you have a better idea.
Yeah, if I may chip in here,
Yes,
I
yes.
wouldn't totally agree with you that the rootlessness that you described earlier doesn't contribute to it. I think you brought up the issue of community solidarity.
Yes.
Community solidarity comes with a lot of community support, peer support, parental advice, elderly advice, role modeling, and so forth. And such very coherent, cohesive, harmonious societies have less cases of alcoholism and therefore also less cases of domestic violence. So I think there is a great deal of impact the urbanization and the resettlement from rural to urban places have brought about. There are many cultural themes that we can start to highlight to perhaps address this, not totally eliminate the issue, but perhaps reduce it. There are many Buddhist topics that we could bring up. The whole idea of, for instance, the Vajrayana focus on femininity as a divinity, of how actually even being contemptuous to a woman and speaking harsh words towards a woman is enough to break the root samaya, the root precepts of Vajrayana Buddhism. And almost all people in Bhutan, Buddhist in Bhutan, having wang or empowerments from the lamas are bound to follow these precepts. And one of the root precepts is you don't abuse a woman, either verbally or physically or even mentally. So these topics can be brought out, I think, more vigorously by religious persons particularly.
Yes, but there is also this lagging and nagging concept in Bhutan, which is not only in Bhutan, Tibet also. And I think you explained it once, how false it was very well, Dr. Karma. It's that a woman is inferior to a man and has to take rebirth 9 times to be equal to a man. This is a false belief, and it is so deeply ingrained in the society. And this could be also highlighted, that this is a false belief.
Yeah, we have lots of such belief systems, cultural practices that were put in place to support the patriarchal system we had in the past. And as we now move beyond such a system, there are other themes that we can bring in.
Yes.
So I think there are cultural topics that we can start to highlight to help solve the problem.
Maybe I am a little depressed because I'm reading a Bhutanese book right now, written by a Bhutanese author, which takes place in a village. And it's domestic violence and alcoholism. So it might be I'm influenced by this, sorry.
On another point about, say, the wife not willing to denounce the abusive husband, there we have a much tricky, much more difficult dilemma to face, because it's really the choice between her own individual well-being and the family as a unit. And it is a very tough decision for lots of people.
Yes.
My name is Dr Mike from Royal Institute of Management. I'm an Australian volunteer. I'd like to start with an observation that the countries that do well in terms of educational performance, and also the countries that report high scores on measures of happiness, don't teach young people what to think, they teach them how to think. And I agree that perhaps there are some structural issues in terms of teaching in Bhutan, in my very limited sort of experience, and I agree with the idea that we need to make education, particularly in culture, more interesting for students. But I wonder, and perhaps you could comment on the idea that maybe it's that we're not teaching students how to think, or we're not giving them the tools to think in alternative ways that might be the problem, and that they are simply rebelling against situations where they're being told what to think.
Well, I would agree with you in some measure, yes. But I feel also, especially at college level, now I never taught in higher secondary school, so I cannot tell you, but at college level, I have I taught in college since 2001 till 2015-16. I can see a huge change in the outlook of the student. In 2001, 2002, you could tell them anything, they would say yes, yes, yes. Now they have learned, and I suppose it's also through BBS, seeing the debate on BBS, with how to contest or how to ask you questions. So I'm quite positive that they really start now to know how to think, much better than, say, 15 or 20 years ago. But that's my own take on it. Thank you.
My question is very simple. In fact, based on culture, I was wondering, I think we must know this basic question and understand this most importantly about, we do consider ourselves as a Bhutanese having a unique culture. In fact, even in terms of governance, we talk about a lot of things about being unique in terms of transition and the democratic governance that we possess. So for that matter, what do you think can be Bhutanese? Like, who are Bhutanese, if you are made to understand and look at it? Who are Bhutanese? And what do you think the democratic culture of Bhutan can be termed, if we are given to make that term for the uniqueness of what we possess as of now? So, who are Bhutanese, by the way, and what democratic culture can we term it if we are asked to make a uniqueness of what we are? I learned that there's something like called natural democracy, and more than 64 different kinds of democracies being done all over the world. But Bhutan must have it one. So what do you think should be one for us?
I think this is not a simple question at all. As usual, a simple question can be very, very difficult. So I don't think, and first and second, political anthropology is not my field. I'm a cultural anthropologist. And regarding, I will try to answer somehow quickly. There was a very good full issue of the Druk Journal, maybe you have seen it, on Bhutanese identity last year or 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
2 years ago, and you participated. It showed how complex it is to define an identity. So, for example, who I am. I am Bhutanese, I'm French, I'm mixed, I'm what? This is very difficult. What is an identity? It's how you feel, first of all, how you feel for the country, how you feel, where is your allegiance lies. That's what I feel is identity. But in terms of politics or political system, I think Bhutan has a unique democratic system, in the sense that I have never studied or heard before of a king having the absolute power, more or less, and just devolving it to the people, retiring quite young. When we see that in Malaysia, Mahathir has been elected at 92. I mean, that's, so the king itself left the power, devolved the decision to the people by giving them democracy. And this is unique. I'm not saying the democracy is fantastic or is working. No democracy works. As Churchill said, democracy is the best of the worst system of government or something like that anyway. So this is unique. That the democracy was given by the king and encouraged by the king, and who made a constitution which is a safeguard of the democracy and of the country. I remind you that England has no written constitution. England has no written constitution, which floors me when I learn. So this is what is unique in Bhutan, is that the king has devolved the power to the people through democracy. And I don't see, willingly, and I don't think that there is any other country in the world where it happened. The Emperor of Japan had to give some kind of democracy to the people after the World War II, but it was under the pressure of the American conquerors, victors. So, as far as I know, in France we couldn't get it. We got the head of the king. Simple. So, and look in the Middle East. They don't have kings as such, but they have despots, and how they can get rid of them. So I think Bhutanese democracy is unique.
Yeah, just to clarify, I think we do everything about this uniqueness in a way through articles or something. What I'm trying to think is, and expecting from you is, do you have any term for that uniqueness? That knowledge? Because there are 64 to 70, like 67 kind of democracies being done by different culture or based on governance. So do you think any term would suit our, like naming of our uniqueness?
I never thought about it. I'm very sorry. I never thought about it, and I'm too small person and with no political anthropology or to be able to do that. I think.
And this on based on the culture.
You're being pushed to come up with a terminology. I think we, at the moment, don't have a specific terminology to describe this. I would say our democratic process is too young for us to even actually pinpoint an identity, a political identity that we have built based on this. Anyway, can we move to the last question, and then I'm going to wrap up. Oops.
Oh,
So,
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. My name is Phuntsho. I'm just thinking that most of the time was over here in our country, we can see that just coming up with central school, it's kind of problem for most of the teacher or children or parents. It's quite a huge topic for everyone to talk. But at the same time, I'm just thinking to connect with our culture and with the education system. We can't really change the overall education system, but at the same time, to have when we plan for the structure, I mean come up with the education development system, I mean to set up a school. For example, for central school, they want to have all the children in one school from class PP to 12, which is actually a quite huge by room. At the same time, there is a huge gap between the parent and the children from a very young age. So for that, we're just thinking that if either of the doctor could have some thought, since most of the time when I go out for rural areas with some projects, especially toilet or footpaths in the southern foothills, so we found that teachers are saying that most of the community schools are playing a vital role in the community to have a social development. They are kind of a medium for the children and the government and the school to have proper set community. For that, if you all have some thought and ideas to share with us, it would be very helpful. Thank you so much.
very briefly, Francoise, if you can.
I think the central school issue has been debated and is still being debated at length in the education sector. So let's not talk about that as such, but let's just say that I feel that community school, yes. And I have, for example, a simple example. In community school, when you have in the valley, for example, or in the area, when you have a religious festival or a community festival, the community school will give holiday to the children, so they can go back home and be with the parents for the festival. Now, if they are in central school, how, for example, this link between culture and education, how it's going to be? Will the parents come all the way to pick their children? Will their children be allowed to be going to the local festival? That's as an anthropologist and preserving the culture, this is certainly a little bit of a worry. Yes, I agree.
Thank you. I have my final question for you, and that is,
Okay.
we always ask the speakers to choose 2 books from the New York Times bestseller list, but I gather you chose local publications over international
You
bestsellers.
didn't tell me to choose about New York Times.
Sorry for that, but the Bhutan Dialogues organizers should have informed you. But you chose, I think you prefer to have some local publications, and we normally ask what books you chose and why. So why did you choose the local publications?
I chose the local publication because I want to encourage local knowledge. And of course, this is done by schedule and by you, Dr. Karma, but it's not because of you. In fact, they are very bad books. I don't even know why I chose them. But these are very important books for the history of Bhutan, for the culture of Bhutan. And if you don't know about these people, which are Pema Limpa, his son Tuksedawa Gyaltsen, and his grandson Gyaltse Pema Chinle from Gantegompa, who you don't understand half of Bhutan, at least half of Bhutan, I would say, 3/4. And the origin of the royal family and the monarchy and everything. So, and also the lineage. So it is, for me as a historian and anthropologist, there are 3 precious books. And also they are mostly in Dzongkha. They are not difficult Dzongkha, by the way. You can give them to your children to read, or you can read them because it's a very readable Dzongkha. And they are very important to me for the history of Bhutan, for the identity of Bhutan, with one of the founding father of the Bhutanese identity, which is who is Pema Limpa. That's why I chose them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, thank you for joining us, and thank you, audience, for coming to the session. I normally wrap up the session with a traditional Bhutanese piece of wisdom. Today, as we talk about culture, and with lots of people having this misconception that when we do anything about culture, it's about preserving the past, that culture is static. There is some resistance towards culture because of this misperception. And I brought here with me a local Bhutanese proverb illustrating how dynamic culture should be, how responsive culture should be. And it goes, Lugzang dala yuchang tor. Lugzang dala yuchang len, sorry. Lugin pala yuchang tor. And the liberal translation goes, adopt good cultures even from enemies. Abandon bad cultures of even one's parents. So with that, I would like to close this session. Thank you all for coming, and we hope that you have gained something from this session. So,
thank you very much. I'm very honored. Thank you very much.